Hi everyone, welcome to Wisdom Blogs. My name is Liza Collins, and this week I am talking to Janie Eastoe, who is a nutritionist and colonic hydrotherapist from Berkhamsted. Welcome, Janie.
Hello, thank you for having me.
I've known you for quite some years, it's been really interesting actually knowing you over the years and your passion for what you do. And I really wanted to get you on today to talk about your wisdom around gut health and why you're so passionate about it. So over to you to share your top tips on why having a good gut health is really important to us.
Yeah, I didn't realize I was so passionate until I get to talk about the subject that is my day-to-day life, and I just seem to like rattle on. So you'll have to interrupt if anything like I've gone off on a tangent.
Okay.
But it is important, and I don't think we're instinctively taught this as youngsters at school, or even when we're growing a young family. The importance of making sure that we are feeding our families good food. We're told to have calories in, and then there's waste, but we don't really discuss that because that's dirty and wrong. So I kind of like, the understanding of we do need to eat good food, and we do feed bacteria with that real and good food. I suppose is instinctive in most animal species, but we got interfered with in some way by marketing of foods and the introduction of high processed and sugar foods as well, which we do know now are highly addictive as well. So we end up just craving more salt and more sugar, which actually destroys some of our good bacteria, and helps proliferate the bacteria that should be in our gut, but in accordance to that balance, really. So, I think it all begins with just being more mindful of your foods and what you're eating, and then taking from nature and not changing that too much either. So not over processing your foods.
Mm.
I suppose the best tip I would say is, when you go around the supermarket, just only shop from the first two aisles.
Yes. Yeah.
Which are the vegetables, the fruit, and you'll have a fish aisle and a meat aisle, and then don't go any further.
Yeah, and I've heard it said as well, or just shop around the outside of on the walls, because all of the processed food tends to be in the middle. I've heard it said that way as well.
That's probably, yeah. You'll have your bakery bit, and yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, it's good to sort of like maybe venture into where the beans and pulses are, and they tend to be in your middle aisles. But yeah, keep around the edges. That's a good idea. Yeah,
Yeah.
and don't spend too long in there because you'll get tempted.
Absolutely, absolutely. So in terms of gut bacteria, because I mean, this is something I discovered quite some years ago, but again, it's not something that we're taught, and it's only if you have an interest in gut health and your health that you start discovering some of this information. And I guess what I think I found the most important as well, when I became a mum and I was starting to discover about gut health, we all get taught the first feed of colostrum is really, really important. And it was never really explained why. And then when I started looking into gut health a bit more, then as the kids were growing, I realized that that first feed saturates the gut with all the good bacteria, whereas bottle feeding would saturate the gut more with like sugar feeding bacteria, or, to the wrong information. And I remember saying that to a lady that I worked with who didn't have children but had horses. And she said, "What? Everybody knows that with horses." And I just thought it really struck me that why is it that women know this about animals and about horses, but mothers, speaking for myself and many other people that I know, we didn't know this about our own milk and our own bodies, and why this was so important. It's probably changing now, and I don't know if you've noticed things changing and the people that come into your clinic. So can you talk a little bit about the bacteria and how we can be more mindful about keeping it healthy? What do we need to keep it healthy?
Yes, it's a really good point. Why don't we be told about our own bodies? But then again, that comes back to marketing a little bit
Yeah.
as well. That there's an agenda out there to sell you a product. keeping your good health, the good health of your bacteria is, again, it's mostly down to the foods we eat. It does, if we go right to the beginning, like you say, it does start from that first feed, you know, taking your mother's milk, but even before then, it's the birthing process. So if you're birthing naturally, your baby's seeded straight from that beginning. And it doesn't mean to say that anybody that's been a C-section baby has been, you know, is under problems, but yes, you do have to be more careful with them, and you do have to help make sure they're breastfed. And then when you're weaning them into foods as well, that you're doing real, not jarred food, but real foods as well. And it is important for babies to crawl around.
Yes.
You know, we live in this over sterilized era, you know, everything, you know, don't let them touch anything, but it's how we grow our bacteria is by touching soil and putting it in his mouth. Of course, you've got to be careful. I mean, there are other things in the soil as well, but no, it is important that we get dirty.
Yes, no, I completely agree. It reminds me of something an old boss said years ago, had 3 children. And he said, the first child, you're always really mindful, the dummy falls on the floor and you sterilize it. The second one, you kind of run it under the tap. The third one, you wipe it on your trouser leg and stick it back in.
Or
And
even suck it from your own mouth and then
yeah,
stick it back in. Yeah,
exactly. He said, but then on reflection, his third child is the healthiest out of all of them because they've had exposure to all that
exposure.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you can, you know, you can increase that ability to feed your gut bacteria by having fermented foods, which is something that's been around for, of course, a very long time, because it's about preserving. You know, how did we used to preserve food before refrigeration and freezing? So yes, there was canning, but fermenting your food will help it last. So this, you know, then you've just got a wealth of different gut bacteria. So we've probably all heard of things like kombucha and sauerkraut, but there's little things that you probably don't think about, like your vinegars.
Oh, okay. Anyone's in particular? Because I'm thinking we've got your apple cider vinegar, but balsamic vinegar, that's going to have
And
sugar.
balsamic vinegar is fermented red wine.
Right. Okay.
And then even your malt vinegars, because you can preserve things in vinegars as well. So, you know, you're probably getting them more readily than you realize, but it's just being aware of that as well. Just going, oh yeah, I'll make sure I do use that balsamic in there as well. And yeah, there will be sugars that, you know, present in them, but again, it's about that balance of sugars as well. You do need some sugars, but it's making sure they're not overly processed and you're not having them in too much of a abundance. And that and again, it's another modern issue. We have an abundance of food. It's a good problem, but it, you know, you have to be mindful about how you take on that abundance as well. And then we've got so much more research going on. I mean, even 20 years ago, we didn't have the research available to us for the understanding, and we are only just touching the surface of it, where we're realizing that our immune system is integral to our gut health as well, you know, and that's based on our bacteria. That those that have had fecal transplants, if the donor obviously is vetted very well, but it's found that if you had a donor from somebody with maybe an ability to lose weight or gain weight easily, so the new donor will have that issue as well, because the bacteria has a memory as well, and it works a certain way. So you've got to be, I mean, it does help repopulate a very depleted large intestine, colon, but you're going to feed somebody else's bacteria into you. It's almost like it's a mini personality all in itself. And that's what usually where people switch off, you know, a fecal transplants, but actually it's getting out there, you know, more and more people are doing it. You know, if you've had really severe bowel conditions, inflammation and damage, you know, sometimes no matter how many, the steroids that your doctors will throw at you, and then all the healthy stuff that you've tried to do, there's what else can you do? You really need to reseed the colon.
Okay, so on that point then, okay, so if you've got someone with complex health issues, then take him, I guess it depends on what it is, and I guess, and the health, you know, so I suppose I'm thinking out loud, try probiotics, you can try fermented foods, and then if you get to that stage of those aren't working, then those people would then look to have a fecal transplant. Is that? And
I mean, they'll have got. They probably wouldn't even be able to get to me if they were even at that stage of needing fecal transplant, because the inflammation would be so bad that even I wouldn't be able to treat them at that stage. But it is about it's not so much stripping back, but it's simplifying everything as well. If you were really poorly and no matter what you did, your complicated health issues, you've just got to strip it right back and go and almost reseed and start again. Yeah.
Did you find that then with your work with the colonics, that's part of that process of the colonics being able to just clean out the colon, take away any of the built up materials, and helping to reseed the gut with good bacteria? Just can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, because the big misconception is that I'm going to actually clear the playing field of your bowel. Like I'm going to I'm sticking bleach in there and it's going to kill everything. Not at all. But it does help your body start to rebuild and repopulate in a better way. But it is about what you do as a person up here, what you put into your mouth, and not just physically how you eat, emotionally how you eat as well. So you've got to be in the right space. You shouldn't eat when you're upset, and you shouldn't eat when you're angry, and you've got to be mindful about when you eat, because the digestion process starts with the sight, the smell, the readiness for food as well. And but bringing in those and digesting that food will also help you kill off any sort of like bugs and viruses that you shouldn't have sort of infiltrating your system as well. So food poisoning, for example, some people might eat the same meal and only one of you gets the food poisoning, and it might be that somebody ate slower, had better stomach acid, and was able to, that acid killed off the bacteria that made everyone else poorly. So you've got to be thoughtful about how everything goes in top end as well. The bottom end is a little bit like clearing out the bin physically, but also it does help remind the bowel of its natural function as well. So your nice wave-like movement of your bowel, the peristalsis, can get disrupted in emotional situations, and if you're in fight, flight, freeze, for example, if you're constantly under pressure, work, home, the stresses. So it might be that it constantly goes too much, or it might just go, it's not a safe space, we're not going at all.
So just going back to what you said then about making sure you're in that correct emotional state before you eat. So I'm just trying to then think about the physiology of your body. So when you mentioned, so for example, so if you're stressed or angry and your body's in some kind of agitation or fight or flight, does that then inhibit the digestive enzymes coming into the system to be able to digest your food? Is that what that is?
Exactly, yeah. So you will not produce the enzymes, the saliva to help start breaking down the food from the first chew. Your stomach acid won't be building up and getting ready in your stomach, readiness for that arrival of food. And then also it won't move. So it depends. Some people, exactly, flight, fight, or freeze. Some people will just freeze, so everything stops. Some people it's flight, so everything has to move through the system really quickly. And it's all about making sure there's enough blood supply going to the muscles that are needed to deal with that emergency situation. So that would be your heart and your running away leg muscles. Digesting, it's not important right now. So your blood supply changes direction. So it will be your digestive system, but you're like, no, it's not needed there right now. So you don't get a chance to do your job.
Yeah, and what just struck me then when you mentioned that, because I was aware of the fight, flight, or freeze and how that would impact us in terms of, so for example, like the freeze, you would be like that rabbit in headlights. You have that dream when you're trying to scream and nothing comes out, it's that freeze. Yeah. I didn't realize that, and it makes sense that then also happens inside. I was aware that all the blood would go from the major organs and digestion and reproduction out to the limbs, run away. But it's fascinating as well to think about. It also then affects our bowel. So if we're in the fight or flight, it could speed things up. But if we're in freeze, it'll slow things down. Until you mentioned that, I didn't see it rippling down through to the functions of the bowel, which makes perfect sense.
And I guess I personally see a lot of clients that may have had a frightful situation, stressful, it might have been a physical situation or emotional that happened 10 years ago, but their body's become into a pattern of it.
So in a bit like sort of like post-traumatic stress or something like that, their body's caught in that cycle. So do you find that even though emotionally they've moved on, their body is still
in that pattern?
Wow.
So and I guess we are, we're very logical, straightforward. Well, of course this is, I'm beyond this now, I've had X amount of counselling, but your body's not remembered that. Your body's still in that pattern of, upset and waiting for the tiger to come around the corner and get you.
Wow. Okay, that's fascinating. So what do you do to change that? Do you have to, because like I said, they might have emotionally done the work, but their body is still caught in that pattern. How do you then tell the body that it's safe? Because I guess I'm thinking about the bowel as well, to let go.
Yes, and that's where the physical water, the warm water, and using herbs as well within that warm water helps reset the bowel, because you're in sympathetic mode. Your body's like function, and actually allowing the bowel to work more unconsciously, the parasympathetic, so you're actually properly relaxing as well, and deep down resetting the whole system. So I think that's where, if it is, I mean, what came first, the chicken and egg? Is your mind talking to your bowel, or is your bowel talking to your mind? Well, actually, I think it's a complete loop, and
yes, I agree,
constantly going round all the time.
Rather
than what's in charge of you versus who are you in charge of. You've got, it's that yin and yang, isn't it? It's that you're constantly in these waves.
Yeah, and I've heard as well, it's said quite a few times that the gut is like a second brain. It makes sense that it is that complete loop.
It's like your gut. And
if you think,
your heart, you listen to your head and trust your gut.
Oh, that's absolutely fascinating. So I mean, what's your kind of like top recommendations to people if they've never really thought about their gut health? Because I mean, like, for people like us, I mean, we love talking about this, we're quite happy to talk about, go to the loo and have, quite in-depth discussions. That's fantastic. I'm really passionate about it, and I know you are. So for people who've never really thought about gut health and why it's important, what would you share?
I think the first thing would be is to be aware that you are pooping every day, and kind of just get round.
Should be.
It should be, and be okay with that. But recognise that you might be a little bit shy going to the toilet, or you're quite open about it, and then going, okay, so am I going to the toilet every day as well? And that should be at least a daily occurrence. If not, then start watching how many days in between and what's happening there. We're never taught about going to the toilet, and this is where people probably look at me in the middle of a treatment. I go, right, I'm going to teach you how to go to the toilet, and they go, oh my god, what is she going to come up with next? and all it is routine. Creatures of habit are we, aren't we? We feel safe with routine as well, so it's creating that routine with the morning or the evening. For some people, we brush our teeth every day, we wash our face every day, we'll wake up and have a drink of water every day. Why don't we address our bowels every day? So it's first thing on waking, usually we've got a reflex that will set everything in motion. So you go with that, go to the toilet for 10 minutes and switch off, allowing yourself just that time. And then it doesn't matter if anything happens or not. You do that for a week, you will find you'll start to get emotion coming through, because your body is set to routine. It's like, oh, it's time to brush our teeth, it's time to have a drink. We all know when we're getting ready for food, we feel hungry, and they usually go because that time's come, the time of day where we normally eat. So trust your body will get into place with that. The next thing would be, I suppose, again, it's like look in your kitchen cupboard. How much sugar, how many processed foods are you taking in on a weekly basis? Don't worry, you know, like getting into the fine detail of day to day, and don't beat yourself up, but slowly take those foods out of the shopping basket in the supermarket. Really start thinking about adding in more vegetables into your diet. You know, your plate should be mostly vegetables, big portions of vegetables, and sort of, if you do eat meat and fish, it should be more of a side portion rather, so your veg is the main event. And keeping variation as well, you know, and seasonally, it's lovely to be able to eat seasonally, and I do think we get the best out of our veg if we do. And there is something in organic, you know, we're not over processing the food right from the beginning. We're not giving it pesticides, because remember, we're ingesting those, and our body has to deal with that, and that will affect how our body processes that food. So if you're having dairy products, think about, you know, is it an organic product? Because you'll have hormones and you'll have antibiotics and the steroids in that milk that you're taking on as well. So probably the main thing to do if you are having dairy is to go organic with your dairy produce.
That's brilliant. And then what about water? How do you think we need to?
So water's always, like, some people drink like litres of water a day, and then I get people that drinking, I have 10 cups of tea a day. Somehow everyone seems to be surviving. So whatever you're doing now, I would say address it. Go, what am I drinking? Be really real about it. Am I drinking 500 ml of water a day and 10 cups of coffee? Or am I drinking 3 litres of water a day and just herbal teas? It's balance. You know, there's nothing wrong with having a really good quality cup of coffee, but then just leave it. One's enough. Get onto your water, because we do need diuretics and we do need stimulants in our diet. And there's such thing as too much of a good thing. And the same goes with water. Don't have too much water, because you're washing out electrolytes. So zoop it up. Put lemon in it, squeeze lemon, have your herbal teas as well. You know, think about, you know, you've got to keep that balance of it as well. But drinking like 10 cups of coffee and a 500 ml of water, you need to change the balance there.
So just thinking about the time to start wrapping things up. So obviously we've talked a bit about colonics. If somebody wanted to find out a little bit more about colonics, curious but a little bit intimidated, you know, what would your recommend? And we'll put all your details in the show notes below. What would be your recommendation or advice to people?
So if you are thinking about locally going to see your colonic hydrotherapist, I always would say use ARCH, the Association and Register of Colon Hydrotherapists. The training that I undertook and that you undertake to be an ARCH therapist is second to none. You're constantly taken care of as well throughout your career. You're subjected to checks of your colonic room. You're also, and you have to do at least the minimum of 30 hours of continued professional development. So they're up to date and they've been trained to a very, very high standard. So we've been joking throughout the pandemic, you know, everyone's having to change their infection control protocols. Ours have been like that all along.
Oh, interesting.
we probably, what have we changed? We wear a mask, but we always wore aprons and gloves, and you know, everything was wiped down from handles from the moment you walked in. So for us, it's just business as usual.
Yeah, fantastic. And I think I'd add one extra to that as well. The first time I was introduced to colonic hydrotherapy is when I lived in Australia, and I'd gone for a facial, and the lady said to me, have you tried this? And I said, no. And she said, I'm going to recommend you to a lady. And she said, you've got to go to somebody who is really passionate and enthusiastic about doing colonics. And this lady was. And then when I came back to the UK and I found you, I thought you're the UK equivalent. So I would add to go to somebody who is totally passionate and can talk about poo all day long, which I know that, you know, you can. And it's making it completely normal, completely relaxed, and not fun in, you know, but fun in a kind of relaxed, it's completely normal. And I
always get the wide-eyed, some men and women like look at me wide-eyed where I'm talking to them and I'm just so easygoing with them, and they kind of go, are you supposed to be easygoing with it? Yes, Yes, this is another day in the office. You're going to feel great. Come on in. It'll all be good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And I've, you know, from speaking from personal experience, you know, when I started to have colonics, your PMT goes literally for me overnight, you know, just getting rid of things like candida, just helping to just regulate your sleep patterns, your energy levels. And I was quite shocked when I started to educate myself around gut health and colonics, and then experiencing it, just the difference that it made to my health. So I think if that's just one thing to share with people, if you're curious, I would definitely get in touch with Janie and look at her website. I'll put all that in the show notes below. And yeah, and I just think, you know, here's to everybody having amazing, happy gut health, because I think that's the way of creating our health in the future. It always has been. I think, you know, I think there's just been a couple of generations that missed this. If I think back to my great grandparents and the way that they would talk about, well, they wouldn't talk about gut health like the conversation we've just had, but they had the fermented foods. You know,
Yes.
they would use things like Epsom salts for the liver. They would use things
Yes.
like castor oil if they were
Yes.
constipated. They use all these natural things. So I think it's just been a couple of generations where it's missed. So it feels like we're bringing a lot of that back.
Bringing it home, aren't we?
Exactly. Yeah. So thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate you speaking with me. And if you like what we spoke about today, please give us a big thumbs up and share with anybody that you feel will really benefit from our conversation today and to help people with gut health issues. And if you just want to have a better health and improve your immune system and have good health, then it's been lovely that you've joined us. And thank you so much for listening. And thank you, Janie, for joining me. Take care.
Thank you.